Pete Engardio, one of my OPC colleagues, asked, can you talk a little bit about cyber surveillance of journalists? How pervasive it is becoming, and how does it affect journalists' ability to meet or speak with sources? And sources is a question I had as well, that I had prepared, that this seems to me that this is a real difficulty. And frankly, I was even seeing this in Hong Kong before I left, after the national security law had been imposed on Hong Kong. People who used to speak even about things like the economy were no longer speaking as freely. Can you talk a little bit about that, Chris? And you were there a long time. Did you over time find it, with increased surveillance, more and more difficult to get people to talk to you?
I think the general political atmosphere in China and the tightening of that atmosphere over the past few years has had much of a chilling effect as direct surveillance of people. And we as journalists and people we talk to, our friends, interview subjects, we're all generally aware that our electronic communications, our use of WeChat, the popular Chinese social media platform that everybody uses, that all of that may be surveilled. And so when you approach people, when you try to organize things, of course you have to be cautious. But I always found it was a sort of a balancing act that we had to achieve. The Chinese state security apparatus is very large, very busy. The quality of the people inside varies enormously from area to area, is all I would say. But they also have an awful lot of other people to surveil as well. So I think sometimes they're sort of drowning themselves in their own information. And so, so you have to be aware of that when you approach somebody. And I don't think it was a matter of sort of exercising due caution, but not exercising so much caution that you might appear that you were doing something clandestine or something that wasn't your job to do as a journalist. So I always thought it was a question of maintaining that balance. And as I said, the quality of state security in China has certainly expanded, but you come across extremely skilled operatives. You come across quite a few clowns as well. I just want to add something to Jim McGregor's question as well. I think one of the worries now is that, I'm old enough that it was possible to stumble into journalism in China at a time when work conditions there were much more relaxed, when getting visas was much easier, when the general environment for working there was easier as well. And my worry is now that all of those aspiring journalists who want to break into China reporting, it's become so much more difficult for them now. And I think, as a community, that's something we have to think about as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, sad point, but an important one.
Jodi, can I add something about I thought Jim asked a really interesting question. And I think that, I guess, maybe working at the Post and sort of, I might be sort of, a bit more attuned to that world, but I have noticed that kind of as China has become a bigger and bigger subject in Washington, we've seen just, I guess, an explosion of coverage, particularly sort of from the national security and sort of foreign policy and diplomatic worlds, coming out of sort of DC journalism. And, I think that is both for better and worse. I think it's fantastic that, these issues are getting the attention and the discussion and the debate that it deserves. But, maybe what Jim is referring to is that, these are very much kind of, discussions inherently from that sort of, American national security sort of perspective that might miss the broader picture, and what, in which sort of the reporters and the sources may not necessarily have as nuanced and sort of in-country experience and knowledge as we might like. That said, I have also noticed this trend of, more and more, at least American outlets, employing former China correspondents to cover U.S.-China out of Washington. I think they bring a huge sort of, reservoir of knowledge and experience. And I think that that's only a great thing. And I think, as more and more outlets add those positions, that's definitely a positive in my book.
Right. Well, and all of you who are still sort of covering China or not, in your case, won't be, but you don't lose that, right? And your news organization doesn't lose that. So I think that's an important point.
And I think editors are seeing that. Yeah. They're seeing the value of that.
Yeah, great.